Wonderful. Welcome everyone to this International Women's Day conversation. We are inspired to host this event because we acknowledge and recognise that International Women's Day is not a celebration yet. It is a day of growth, of learning, of understanding each other so that we can see true change on the issues that women face. I'm really excited to be part of this panel today. We have reached out to some incredible women to share their perspective and their experience. In my own experience, it's from conversations that I have learnt the most about gender equality and gender equity. You can't undervalue the power of a conversation to connect and move things forward. So today we are going to have a conversation with some really, as I mentioned, inspirational and wonderful women. But I invite you to join in the conversation as well. If you have a question for the panelists or something you'd like to share, please feel free to use the reactions button and pop your hand up, and I will come to you. If you don't want to say it in person, that's fine. Pop it in the chat. I will go through the chat as well. But yeah, I do invite you to put your hand up if you'd like to contribute yourself. Yeah, I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I come from today, which is the Yagara and Turrbal people. As we gather to share stories and experiences, in doing so, I do acknowledge and pay homage to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's rich history of storytelling. I also acknowledge on this International Women's Day the matriarchal leadership that the Aboriginal culture embraces and how much we have to learn from the world's oldest living people. I'm going to welcome our panelists to the floor, starting with Amy. Where are you? I'm going to spotlight you. There you go. Amy Marks, thanks for being here. She is a physically disabled filmmaker, advocate, and activist. In 2021, Amy Marks was awarded the Stella Young Award for her commitment to arts and advocacy, and has previously won various other awards and scholarships for her commitment to media diversity for disability. When not working in the disability sector, Amy does freelance video editing and motion graphics and her own creative projects. Previously, Amy has worked at the Youth Disability Advocacy Service, Children and Young People with Disability Australia, been a board member at Disability Resources Centre, and worked with several other organisations statewide and nationally to increase inclusion, skills building, and opportunities for disabled young people. Thanks for being with us here today, Amy. It's wonderful to see you. I would also love to introduce you to Jemmy Jang. She's a new friend of mine, and I can't wait to dive in today on this conversation. Jemmy is the founder of Penny. Jemmy is a social policy professional and strategist with extensive experience delivering state government reforms. Most recently, her career has focused on innovation, digital and customer transformation. She currently leads the New South Wales Government's Customer Culture Program, which is embedding a customer-focused culture across the New South Wales Public Service. In January 2021, Jemmy brought her expertise together with her passion for economically empowering women to kickstart Penny. She first came up with the concept in 2018 while working in a small team partnering startups to address complex policy problems, and following a series of candid conversations with other women about their money goals, experiences, and challenges. A subsequent survey of 100 women solidified her commitment to finding innovative and effective solutions to financially empower women. Thanks for being here, Jemmy. Seep, welcome to the virtual stage. Seep is a software engineer who loves breaking out of her comfort zone and trying new things. With a background in communications, her career expands over several industries, including healthcare, construction, and education. Seep is also a new parent, surviving on very little sleep and exhaustion. I've been there, Seep, I get it. And she is a former Code Like a Girl intern, and she is passionate about supporting other women to break into tech. Thanks for being here, Seep. Yeah. Hayley, Dr. Hayley Williams, please come to the stage. Dr. Hayley Williams, is a research fellow at the School of Psychology, the University of Queensland. and an expert in applied health psychology, youth trauma, Indigenous health, and Indigenous research methodologies. Hayley has worked in Indigenous and mental health research for over a decade, using strengths-based and community-driven approaches to improve the health and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in rural, remote, and urban settings. Hayley's research focuses on improving the social and emotional well-being, resilience, and thriving of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and caregivers that have experienced traumatic events, with particular interest in paediatric burn injuries. Hayley's work also focuses on developing co-designed programs to improve the health and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their access to culturally responsive, trauma-informed care with Aboriginal community-controlled health services, primary and tertiary health services. And finally, a good friend of mine who I will add no doubt a valuable insight to this conversation. Madison Bajuki is a communications coordinator at Code Like a Girl. Madison is a communications coordinator and is passionate about gender diversity and the LGBTQIA+ community. Madison communicates her social justice advocacy through writing, events planning, and community engagement. Outside of her work, she enjoys comedy shows and teaching her parents what pronouns are. So if it all goes belly up today, Mads is going to break out a comic routine, right, Mads? So thank you everyone for being here today. Really such a diverse panel in terms of experience, in ideas and thoughts and training. And that's what we love to embrace here at Code Like a Girl is understanding the differences we have and also the things that bring us back together. So to start with, I'm going to throw it over to you, Amy, because you're at the top right of my center of my screen, sorry. Amy, what does International Women's Day mean to you? Big question.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. I'll refer to myself as Amy Marks just to make it super easy, or Amy M, because there are two Amy's here today. For me, International Women's Day, I think, is something that I wish had more meaning than maybe it does at the moment. Occasionally, I feel like, well, more than occasionally, I feel like it can be seen as a bit of a box check day by wider society. In terms of, oh, it's International Women's Day. We've all had a pink cupcake before, and we've all been given that sort of thing. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like younger people and myself and everything else were kind of like, yeah, but it needs to be more than that, right? Like, it actually needs to be an action. And yes, and I don't want to just say that's younger people pushing that movement, but I feel like it's really coming to the forefront there. So yeah, just like, I think it means, recognizing women, and particularly, as Amy pointed out, women from Indigenous communities and women from places and voices that we don't usually hear from. So I think all of that is, yeah, kind of what International Women's Day means for me. And I just hope that it really becomes, and it is becoming, like a really meaningful day for all.
That's awesome, Amy. Thank you. And I want to come back to you soon about that sharing of voices. I think there's some reflection that needs to happen. So I'll come back to you soon on that one. Seat, welcome. Hello. Thank you for being here. As a former Code Like a Girl intern, I'm so happy that you put your hand up to be involved in this conversation. So thank you. What does International Women's Day mean for you, Seat?
So, like, coming from the field of software engineering, I feel there is like a lot of reflection needs to be done about where we are today and from where we started. So the women coders in Australia have actually gone down from 35% in 90s to 25% today. And then I see that there is another like a freeze in funding, which has happened for the STEM careers. By the government. The government is reviewing that. It's a 12-month review, and so it even makes it more difficult for more women to come in tech originally and like even stay there. So yeah, it's a good milestone to think about that, how far we have come from where we are starting, and helping getting diversity in. But yes, you can get diversity in, but can you make sure that those people continue to stay in the workforce because the numbers are falling down? So there are important conversations which needs to be happening about like how to get more students in, like women students in, and getting them encouraged about technology as a field and taking it as a career, and plus helping more women in the early part of the careers with maybe a mentorship program, maybe like a mother who is coming back and you need to suggest something like a structured plan, maybe promotion for part-timers, like whatever. There's not many conversations than just, I think, which Amy said, there's like pink cupcakes. Yeah, there's more difficult conversations which need to be happening today.
I think that's it's really interesting, and I feel like International Women's Day has become something of a conversation about for women of corporate feminism, I think is the best term for it. How the best example of feminism we can give is women who are performing well on boards and doing well in leadership positions and making their mark, but still making their mark within a patriarchal system. And I wonder, at what stage are we going to recognize that simply performing well in a system that was created, that wasn't created with women's inclusion in mind, how long are we going to do that for? And how long do we actually see we have to build a new system that supports women and encourages women? But it's not just women. Inclusion, equity, diversity is not just women, and it's not just women who benefit when an organization becomes more flexible and embraces remote working and embraces just in general, more flexible learning. So I wonder how long it's going to take until we realize we need a whole new system and to finally create some of that change. Thank you, Seep. Jamie, you are nodding your head a lot there, so I would love to hear your reflection so far.
Look, on what you've just said, I completely agree. I think I think of the boardroom table in the same way. You know, at what point do we throw out this concept of the table and start fresh in terms of how we approach who we bring around the table and how inclusive that table is? In terms of, you know, what International Women's Day means to me personally, it is definitely about recognizing the progress that we've made, but also the barriers that continue to exist in terms of achieving that gender equality. And for me, I think International Days of Recognition can actually be powerful advocacy tools in terms of bringing awareness to and global awareness to some of the issues that certain groups are experiencing. And they do send a clear message that in regards to these groups, there's still a lot more to be done and things aren't perfect and okay. Where it becomes a problem, as Amy and even Seep have touched on, is when celebrations start to overshadow the real issues and meaningful action. And when it leads to tokenistic gestures and even sometimes belittling when you're thinking about pink everything, cupcakes, you know, champagne, whatever it is, or they perpetuate stereotypes that can also lead to gaslighting of the groups that they're actually trying to or claiming to support. So that for me is where it becomes a fraught day. And how do we shift from those tokenistic approaches to something that is more meaningful and follow through for the 364 days of the year that follow that initial 24 hours. So that to me is the biggest challenge that I grapple with on days like today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. That was really well articulated. And I was just reflecting when you started talking about the getting rid of this whole boardroom notion. I heard an interview with Celeste in the author recently, and she she reflected that she thought, where women are being expected to come up with the solution. We're saying tear down the boardroom, but then they're asking us for the solution. But hang on a minute. We were never presented the blueprint for the system and the system that we work in now. It was dreamt up. It was the imagination of someone. So why do we have to now create the blueprint? Why can't we be allowed to test and try and sometimes fail, but learn continually? Why is the pressure on women to create a perfect system when we're not even living in a perfect system? The patriarchy couldn't do it, so why do we have to do it? And I think that's a really interesting reflection of, I felt like I was struggling to reflect well to Seep's reply because I couldn't articulate what the future looks like, but I shouldn't have to. We're here to learn, we're here to try. And yeah, I just really love your ideas and your thoughts there. Thank you. Haley, welcome. Haley and I saw each other already today. So nice to see you again, Haley. It's really great to have you on this platform. Haley, what does International Women's Day mean for you? I know how important your work is for you, particularly for the women, the Aboriginal women that you do seek to serve. So what does this day mean to you?
I think sort of similar to what everybody else has shared so far. It's a bit of a complicated one, isn't it? So I think leading up to today, I was thinking it is an opportunity to reflect on the very long line of very strong matriarchs that I come from, and I'm very proud of all of the women, whose shoulders I stand upon, both those that I'm blood related to, but all of the aunties and that I have in community too. But I do that every day, to be honest. So it does feel very much like a ticking of a box. As Jemmy touched on as well, it becomes very problematic when we start to lean more towards celebrating rather than using it as an opportunity to talk about some of the bigger issues that we're still not getting equality for. Going back to that whole idea of the boardroom again, sure, a lot more of us are able to sit at that table, but are we given the resources and opportunities to stay there and to have our voices heard equally as everybody else that's around that table as well? So I think it's an important sort of opportunity to open up some of these conversations.
Beautiful. Thanks, Haley. Mads, how are you today? How are you feeling about International Women's Day?
Yeah, I think I probably will echo just a lot of what has already been said. I think when I think about International Women's Day as a concept, my brain goes to other sort of similar celebrated days, like things like Are You Okay Day, or when everybody posted on Instagram those black squares to raise awareness, these really small pieces of performative activism that at the end of the day, what does that actually amount to? Or what is that, how is that actually progressing anything forward? But I think that's a really that is my sort of first thought about International Women's Day. I acknowledge it's a really cynical or nihilist approach. I want to really recognize all the incredible women and all the incredible people that have led us to even just having this conversation. It's incredible that we're here meeting and talking about this and acknowledging the nuance, but there's also nuance in that as well. So yeah, I think I am just very conflicted overall, I think, which that's fine. We all feel that, right?
It's totally how it is. I'm interested to explore for a minute there. You mentioned the great women leaders that have come before us, and the need to celebrate them. Do you think those great women leaders want us to celebrate?
Oh, I would say so. I mean,
yeah, beautiful.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You don't think, the vision of recent protests comes to mind with the women carrying the signs, how am I still protesting this? And I guess that's kind of where I was wondering from is, yes, celebrate the women, but the work isn't done. So would they be yeah, if we had some of the greats on the stage here now, I wonder if they would be open to that celebration, or instead they'd be shaking their fingers and telling us to get back to work. But it's probably somewhere in the middle, isn't it?
It's like column A, column B for sure.
Amy, I'd love to come back to you. When you first introduced yourself and we got to know you, you mentioned that this day should be a day for making room for other voices. I'll be really honest, the reason we created this event at Code Like a Girl was because we were getting lots of invitations through for panels and events that weren't diverse, that weren't inclusive, that weren't sharing a range of voices. And I really want to reflect on that. If there was a message that you could give the people in the room today who might be invited to sit on a panel that doesn't truly represent the diversity of women in Australia, would you have advice on how they might respond to that invitation, and how we can encourage more diverse voices on panels?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. I just think we may have just missed it. I noticed Jemmy had her hand up in response.
Sorry.
Mad's comment. So I'll just let Jemmy go first and then I'll jump back.
I did miss it totally. Sorry, Jemmy, please.
No, please go ahead. Well, I can add to that. I think what I was going to say is, Madison, you'd mentioned it's a bit cynical. I don't think it's cynical at all. I mean, I think it's real, right? And on the question of whether or not the women before us would want us celebrating, it is a very challenging one. I mean, getting into the psyche of other people, but I have a question as to how much has actually changed from when the whole concept of International Women's Day started, right? Because it's very closely linked to the women's movement at the time. And that movement was very focused on certain women, which is a very similar demographic to the current women who get a lot of profile and celebration on International Women's Day now. So I guess for me, there hasn't been much change, and therefore I'd be leaning towards, I don't know if they'd be wanting us celebrating in the way that we are. I mean, it would be a question of asking them, but yeah, I question how much has really changed, and the catalyst that initially led to the creation and establishment of the day and the issues we're grappling with still today. Maybe there wasn't as much tokenism, but there's still a hierarchy of women who are celebrated and elevated on that day. But Amy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jemmy. How do I follow that answer? Yeah, but just to Amy's point, I guess, about highlighting voices that maybe aren't always in this concept of a room that we talk about. I'm gonna use quite a blunt example, and I've kind of been tossing up in my head whether I want to use this example, but I'm going to. You know, even today I reflected on whether I should join this conversation, particularly as a disability advocate and activist. You know, the two immediate things in my head are, this conversation isn't even captioned. There's no Auslan interpreter. Like, we're automatically excluding a whole bunch of disabled women, really powerful disabled women, from this conversation. Where the juggle is for me is, do I show up? What's more powerful? Do I not show up, or do I show up and say that? Like, what's the move there? I also recognize that I can't speak for the deaf and hard of hearing community, and I wouldn't want to. So it's that juggle, right? Particularly as a woman with disability, you know, it's particularly, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, speaking at it specifically from a disabled perspective, and I say disabled perspective under the theory of the social model of disability. If you haven't heard of that, you can Google it and look it up. And also the human rights model of disability. There's a lot of just women and people in the room, whether it's lack of access to technology, whether it's lack of access in terms of communication, that I'm just aware, you know, don't get included on these days. On my LinkedIn alone, you know, I have so many women with disability posting, why is no one inviting us to International Women's Day events? Like, it's kind of like we're kind of pushed to the side a little bit. So I really am thankful to be here, but it's also that constant juggle of how do you hold parties to account and how do you show up for things. So I don't mean to like trash on anything, and I hope it's not coming across that way.
Definitely not. Amy, thank you so much. You know, when I started this, I said we were here to learn, and we've just learned something from you. So thank you so much for holding us to account. And I'm sure that it will be, knowing the culture here at Code Like a Girl, that's something that we will take very seriously, and there will be changes without a doubt. So thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. And yeah, and we celebrate you for having that, just being such an authentic person. I think authenticity comes back to so much, and it's such an important measure. So thank you, Amy. Hayley, I'm going to come back to you to talk about, I'd like to talk about, and we spoke about this when I first asked you to come on this panel. You mentioned that there was so many similarities about being in a male-dominated industry that you feel you can compare to the tech industry as well. In your career, how have you overcome those challenges? And what's the sort of advice that you would give to, we just did this work, and of course, 10 years ago, Hayley. Maybe we should draw in as well. You know, Hayley in 30 years' time, what sort of advice is she giving Hayley now as she climbs up a career ladder in a male-dominated industry?
That's a great question. And I think, as you just mentioned, authenticity is really key as well. I think in the early stages of my career, I felt very pressured to kind of conform to a way of operating that was more in line with a lot of my male colleagues, just to try and, you know, get ahead and be taken as seriously as them. I don't know that I'm quite there yet, so future Hayley could probably have a few pointers for me. It's still really challenging. For example, I am obviously a doctor, I have a PhD, I share an office with a male colleague, and quite often what I find is, he doesn't have a PhD, sorry, I should add, yet, he's in the process. But often when I share my ideas at work with somebody else, and he's not a part of the conversation, they'll often ask, oh, that's a great idea, could you set up a meeting with that person? And I'm like, oh, hang on a second, that's my idea. Why can't I be the person leading that? So it's still quite challenging. There's still a really long way to go. And I don't think that us women in STEM are being given the same resources and opportunities as our male counterparts. You know, even I have 3 female colleagues at the moment where we're all trying to go for promotion, but we can't get a clearer understanding of what's required of us to go for promotion. So things like that make it really difficult for us to advance. But I think in terms of holding your ground in a very male-dominated space, it really does come back to that sort of authenticity, doing things in line with your values and how you would like to be presenting yourself. And I think, like, you know, just recently with Jacinda stepping down as Prime Minister in New Zealand, and the things that she shared about her experience and how a lot of people sort of critiqued her and her way of doing things, and that she was leaning a little bit too much towards compassion, but then she came back and sort of with that response that that was really authentic to her, and why can't we be leading from that sort of angle as well? And I think that as women, we can really look to people like that for guidance and how we can kind of navigate this space. Yeah. That answered the question, sorry.
That was great. And I'm so glad that you brought up Jacinda in there. When she announced her resignation, to me, that was just such an example of the system is broken. If such a powerful and inspirational leader with such vision can't make it work, then the system is broken. And we can only hope, I'm not sure that many other people got that message, but I think women who aspire to leadership definitely resonated with, if Jacinda can't thrive in this system, the system needs to be updated. Seep, do you have any reflections about working in a male-dominated industry, and as you've been a recent intern, so after your changing career, what sort of reflections, experiences would you like to share today?
So in terms of the reflection as a recent intern and a changing career into like now I'm part of the early career in software engineering, it's been hard. Specifically, like if I look back, like I'm the only one in my team right now as a woman developer. So it can sometimes get uncomfortable in the room where you are the only voice. And I used to have previously another mentor, and like she left. And then once I came back from the maternity leave, the things totally changed, and we had like only just like me as a woman developer in the team, and everybody's like female and senior. So sometimes I feel that when I don't really like, I have to like think about that if I do not get the seat at the table, maybe I have to bring my own seat and be conscious about the fact that what I deliver and what I bring in terms of as my like value. So it like having more women engineers in your community obviously helps you grow and network and come together and learn from. Because I also noticed that I did like a boot camp, and it had maximum men, and I think only very few women there. And so whenever there would be like a code challenge and something we would have to solve, there would be like a couple of my friends who would just stay back and not share their solution. They had already solved the problem, because it was very difficult to actually go there on the platform and on like literally in the middle of the stage and say and share it on the screen, because there are the people who like the other male friendly members would be sharing, or maybe talking aloud. It's like, okay, this doesn't work, or sharing their thoughts, which maybe not be very coming from the students who are starting new, like women starting new, might not be like a very comfortable environment to be in.
Yeah.
So I used to see that they will be contacting their teachers alone on the side to like discuss how things are going. And I've also found that most of the not everybody continued with it. And like some people just like left halfway in the journey, which is obviously like most of the people were changing careers. So it was difficult. Nobody had like a STEM background. So yeah, so I would say the struggle is real, but the things are not going to disappear on their own. We all have to support each other on the journey, and be our own champion and try as much we can. It's difficult, but I would say like the little steps will be making some progress.
Yeah, thank you for your vulnerability, Seep. I'm wondering if you have a reflection on a time that someone's made it easier. It is difficult, but has there been someone do something that has made it easier for you?
Yeah, like when I got like a good mentor, then I thought that that's like one of the very good solution is that like there is somebody who is supporting you in the background, so he's my like manager, and so like giving me like structured environments. Okay, you could try this. Why don't you share this with your team? So making it more comfortable for someone to, okay, then you could try this. Because so I think the people who have helped without getting anything in their returns, they just like supported me in the journey. Any of my founders, any of the people like the women or the men who have supported like me throughout my life, I think they have always making it easier. And yeah, and the forums like this, also, which gives you like voices from different perspectives of life, I think that makes it more easy to continue on the journey which I have.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Seep. There is a question in the chat for you from Muriel. She's asked, was there something that helped you persevere when other women around you quit? Thanks, Muriel. Great question.
Okay. Something which is like they didn't really quit. They basically like moved on to different places. But something which helped me to persevere is like, it's okay. And yeah, like the show must go on. I'm here to obviously learn and grow. And like, okay, that there is a challenge, but the life has to like go on. Yeah, let's fight it out. Yeah, like don't give up. So I've recently started karate, and I started in January. I'm pretty old, like, yeah, 39 years old, so it hurts the core. So the first, I think one of the first karate goal things we have is like never give up. So yeah, uh, I'm on my way to my yellow belt, like this month. Let's hope I get it. Yeah. So right now I'm like halfway there to that. Yeah. But
Awesome. My 5-year-old son has just started karate as well, Seep, and he is so I just love how there's literally parents and children all lined up together learning for the first time. Like it's such an incredible sport. I didn't know enough about it. So that's thank you for sharing, Seep. That was amazing. I am going to let the audience, everyone in the room know we can ask, start asking questions, start thinking about your questions. I'm going to allow for about 15 minutes of questions at the end. So I'm going to wrap up my questioning of the panelists. With it, let's get a little bit dreamy now. And what's our dream for the future? What's our vision for International Women's Day in, let's say, 10 years' time? It's far enough away to see some big change. It's not too far away that it's too idealistic. What do we want to see happen in the next 10 years around gender equality? Let me know if you come up with an answer. I don't want to throw to someone and they're still thinking. I'm going to go on that one. Jamie?
I'll say something. In terms of the day itself, definitely more representative of, intersectional women and identities and all that kind of stuff. Hearing Amy talk, one of the there's a campaign at the moment, I don't know if you guys have come across it, More Voices, More Representation, and something like 75% of women with a disability don't feel represented on International Women's Day. 7 in 10 in Australia overall don't feel represented. So more women don't feel represented than those that do. So that in itself is something that we really need to look at. And I'd love to actually, one of the things I've been thinking about is we've got millions of organizations around the world every year celebrating this and spending God knows how much money on celebrations and morning teas and all of that kind of stuff. I'd love to see them match that funding and actually invest it into the cause for that year. That would be probably one of the things that will shift the dial more than some of the things that we're seeing now. Obviously, it's not just about the money. There needs to be proper action around it, but that's something that's been grappling with in my head. I wonder how much is spent every year on recognizing this day and how much actually goes to the causes that we look to be celebrating on the day. So those are two things that I'd like to see change.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jamie. I love those. Yeah, I feel like that's achievable. Yeah, thank you. Hayley, did you have your vision or dream?
I just saw that Amy went off mute. I don't know if she was going to
Oh,
say.
sorry, Amy.
No, Haley, you please go.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Like more representation of all women on International Women's Day. It's a no-brainer. Like, why are we not doing it already? That's really silly. But I would really like to see us get to a point where, you know, where we are actually genuinely celebrating women, all like the diversity of women and all of our genuine achievements and our ideas and everything like that, not these really superficial like celebrations that we're currently having. You know, yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks, Haley. Amy.
Yeah, just to kind of, I guess, jump off what Demi and Haley have said, I think like, you know, really deconstructing International Women's Day is what it is now, and particularly taking it outside of the corporate space and outside of the academic spaces. Like, you know, I didn't hear about International Women's Day until 5 years ago when I started uni. Like, it wasn't talked about at school or in communities, or like, you know, it's a really almost, I don't want to say elitist, but that's the word that's coming to my brain, kind of celebration or acknowledgement at the moment. And I'd really love to see it kind of go out of those environments, because there's so many women who can contribute so much to these conversations that we are having that aren't in these environments.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I reflecting on what you just mentioned, we had someone once asked us, where's the code like a boy? And well, they were worried that if they brought an initiative like this to their wider group, that they would be asked, where is the code like a boy? And I wonder if that's kind of why it is avoided in community groups and it is avoided in schools, because it feels like a hot potato, for a lack of a better word, that our teachers and educators and community leaders aren't experienced or don't have the confidence to deliver the lesson. So yeah, I like that. I think that's I agree with you, Amy, that's my biggest passion, is that the sparkly events that I see happening today with sparkling rosé and cupcakes, I wish that next year and in the next 10 years they would stop and say, hang on a minute, who's actually in this room and who needs to be in this room to see change. Thanks, Melissa, in the chat. She's mentioned her dream is for the next 10 years is gender equality in representation within teams and across leadership levels, and salary parity, which is so important. I saw a stat recently that women there is a pay gap in every industry in Australia, even the industries that are women dominated, because the men still make up the majority of the leadership positions. And it's just remarkable that that isn't a greater red flag than it is to the people forming those teams. Mads, what's your goal for the next 10 years of International Women's Day?
Okay, so I like how that's how I've started this. My goal is that 10 years time, it's going to be 2033. I like on March 9th, so the day after International Women's Day, that no men in a workplace turn to the women being like, International Women's Day was yesterday, no more ideas. Or like, I'd like no men to make any snarky comments about, oh, you've had your day. Like, I know that sounds like a really like I'm making a joke out of it, but like we've all heard those sort of comments before, and we've all had that like, I don't know, that feeling of like, just having to laugh at those kind of remarks. And I'd like those to be abolished in 10 years time. I think that's a lofty goal, or maybe we'll get there. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree. Amy, I was going to come back to you before we started the call. I mentioned that I was not going on social media today because it makes me too angry. And you agreed that you might stay off. What was your reasoning for staying off social media for the rest of the day?
I've seen a lot of like, oh, where's International Men's Day? And then there was an event like, let the men talk. And I was like, what? So, yeah.
You just want to send them that link to that International Men's Day. I saw a jokey piece in it that was said, men talking about International Women's Day 364 days of the year. It's nothing. Men talking about International Men's Day on International Women's Day. It's through the roof. Yeah, a bit of self-reflection. Thanks, Mads. That was it's a great vision. I love that. I'm going to put that on a 10-year vision board for Code Like a Girl, and we'll come back to it in 10 years' time. See, I'd love to know your vision for the future, and then I will we'll hand over to the room and see if there's any questions from the people that have joined us today.
So globally, there are very less women online. So like who have the access to computers, who can raise their voice or like have access to education. So in 10 years, I know it's a vast size in terms of the population and people like being infected. So, but still, like, I hold this digital gender gap, which hasn't improved since 2011, would be just like reduced a little bit more. And we have even more women who can have access to internet.
Yeah,
it just opens a lot of opportunities, and it's across borders. And the people who, like, I feel that women who can't leave their house for any like domestic violence or anything, it's an outlet. It's an outlet to a world of their own. You can read books, but till what time? You still need to connect with somebody to get sense of community. Because sometimes there are people who can't leave house. And yeah, that's my hope.
Just thinking about your words, I would like to add to that the women whose jobs get replaced by technology over the next 10 years, that they are offered the retraining opportunities that they deserve to be a part of the new economy that's coming. So often women do make up the majority of the short-term casual labour market, and so many of those industries are being affected by technology changes. So I just hope they're offered the support as well into the future. Thank you. Over to the room. Hi, Nivi, good to see you. Nivi wants to hope we celebrate every day is International Women's Day. This happens when we embrace gender equality and equity. Yeah, that's beautiful, Nivi, thank you. Are there any questions in the room? Feel free to pop your hand up and you can ask it to our facilitators, or comments you'd like to make that you'd like to share with our panelists, with the room today. I do invite you to approach your questions with care and respect and love. We're all here to learn from each other as well. So if you do have a question, feel free to pop your hand up and I'll come to you. If anyone sees a hand and I miss it, can you please let me know? Annapurna is in the chat and she's asked, she's trying to change her career into the tech industry at the age of 38. Sometimes she feels doubtful about her decision. Her neighbours and relatives are questioning me that when will you get a job? How can I boost my confidence? Suggestions, please. Without tech background and experience, it's very hard to get her first job. How can I get my first job? Companies are recruiting fresh graduates. Mads, do you want to let Annapurna know about our internship program? If anyone else in the room has some advice for Annapurna after Mads does the shameless plug, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I can do the shameless plug verbally. I can even write it in the chat if anyone else wants to shamelessly plug themselves. But one thing I would recommend to you, Annapurna, is the Code Like a Girl internships, which you can help you, transition into a full career. Otherwise, Code Like a Girl School of Code courses as well that can teach you all the foundations of different coding languages. I will send you an email. I'll put an email in the chat that you can email us and we'll talk there. So shameless plug over.
That's great, shameless plug. See, did you have something you'd like to share with Annapurna?
I will want Vivian to go first because she raised her hand. Yeah.
Vivian, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Hi. So I came from an industry of like hospitality and I want to go to IT and changing careers, and I've worked plenty of jobs where it's either male dominant or it's like a good mix. However, it's very clear that the men get a lot more say. And a lot of the times I've had the courage to quit my job because I've either felt like this situation is hopeless or helpless, or I don't know what to do. I'm just going to remove myself from the situation. But as I keep changing jobs, I keep seeing that this is a pattern. And it's just kind of like, although the conversation we had today is fantastic, and I loved hearing everyone's experiences and thoughts and perspectives on today, it kind of leaves me a bit like helpless in a sense of like, oh, I'm changing careers into something that I know I enjoy, but what happens when I keep coming into these workplaces where as an individual, I don't know what to do myself? Like I could speak up for myself, but then that also has consequences, which is, even though it's brave and I'm bringing up to light what's going on, sometimes if it's a good workplace, then, I'll actually be heard. Or I'm just, someone who's being emotional, is having a bad day and said something that she shouldn't have said. Like, I think I'm just kind of reaching out and asking more so like, what do you say to the people who feel the way I feel?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vivian. I know I have some thoughts, but I really like, does anyone in the panel would like to support Vivian's sort of question and her fears, maybe, Vivian, for the future, perhaps? Experience from the panel?
I would highly recommend just creating a network of women in tech around you. It doesn't have to be within your workplace, but more broadly. So I, for example, have a number of mentors across Australia that I've really connected with, who are trusted people for me that I can have these really tough conversations with and sort of bounce ideas off and say, like, I've come up against this challenge at work, I'm not being heard, how do I get this across to them more effectively? And those women have been really invaluable in being able to help guide me in those situations. But I think too, there's a lot of power in that, building networks, sort of not just in your local sort of area, but more broadly too. And I'm just sort of thinking about, in terms of the First Nation psychology sort of field, which I sit within, we're very much sort of, I guess, now dominated by the women in the sort of industry. And I think that sort of was able to form because nationally we all connected, we all came together and have really deep conversations about things. And then that kind of has become somewhat the norm within this industry. So yeah, I would just recommend to branch out, build some networks around yourself and that confidence and grounding.
Thanks, Hayley. Steve, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think my question, which I wanted to answer, is like the Annapurna and Vivian both. So like, I think that age doesn't matter in terms of a transition to tech. Forget about that. Forget about the naysayers, whoever said. People pretty freaked out when I decided. I just told them I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave my career behind and I'm going to do it from the next year. And everybody gave me shocking sentiments there. But you got to do what you feel is best for you. And what I first started doing is decided what is the career path for me, how long I'm going to invest in terms of my education time, then what opportunities I have in front of me. Do I want to go to university? Do I want to do a boot camp? Do I need, so like, I actually took like a pen and paper and just do diagrams and try to decide, like, did an analysis, like what in looking into my situation, where I would be going. So I think have thought, like, think through what your plan, what is the investment, what time you want to reach to your goals. Then obviously Code Like Girl is a great platform, because I think when I was studying in my bootcamp, I think I reached out as an intern. I applied in the normal process. That's why I would want to be here. And they have like great support. People reach out and they like basically you get to like interview with different companies as per things you've shared in terms of your interests. And once you get selected, you work as an intern, and like everything goes good, you can continue working with them as like full-time engineers or data analyst and whatever field you pick in. So it's a very good pedestal. And there are other women platforms in the country with support, like MyOB is the one, REA is the one. There are several more which are helping more women get into tech who do not have any experience. So, and these are paid, they are paid programs. So you could start, if you're interested, show all that, work on your portfolio, and you can get go. And Vivian, in terms of the mentorship, which we're not getting, I recently joined a new group, which is a tech ladies group. They have like a whole, like a mentor ring, like thing going on. And you are like, it's like more like a, I would say like a match app kind of a thing, where you are matched with a mentor of your interests. And then you can reach out, they share your own journey, and then you work together on a program. So more things like that is coming up. So if you want to hit me up, I can share more details. And yeah, I just joined in, but I look at the profile of the mentors which I got matched. They're like very impressive women in the industry, and I am really looking forward to start like conversation with them.
Thanks, Seth. That's awesome. I definitely have seen that in the tech industry, that the women that want to share and mentor and support. Vivian, I'd also encourage you to, as you look for jobs, you're not the only one being interviewed in that interview room. So make sure, ask the questions that you need to know to make sure that that organization is truly committed to DEI. There's a big difference between a DEI policy and DEI practice. So, I know you've got a lot to offer, Vivian, and organizations will love you working for them. Yeah, I really hope you find an organization that values you in the future. So beautiful. Are there any last questions?
Amy, I just noticed that Jemmy had her mic off just before, and I wondered if she wanted to say.
Thank you. I love this group.
Yeah, if I'm not going to take us over too much.
No, if people have to leave, please leave. But I'm loving this, so I'm going to hang out all day. Not all day. You go, Jemmy.
No. What I was just going to say is, Vivian, I've definitely been there, especially when I think about from the racial perspective and racism in the workplace and how you navigate that. And the challenge is, obviously, these issues are systemic, which is why when you move from workplace to workplace, you're still finding the same issues. And I definitely agree with Haley. It's about finding your people and your tribe and the people who you can lean on and lean into, who, will drive the conversation sometimes. Sometimes you might drive the conversation, but by sharing that load, it definitely helps to reduce that sense of alienation and isolation that you often feel when you're in those situations. And I think for me as well, I remember losing my voice years ago in the workplace, having dealt with some really challenging stuff. And the journey to rediscovering my voice was quite long. But now that I've found it, I've made a point of speaking for people like yourself who don't feel empowered to speak up, or, might still be navigating their own journey towards, you know, the other side, if you want to call it that. So I'd say definitely, like Haley said, find your people, know when to lean in, know when you've hit your limit and you just need to practice some self-care and step back. It's a journey, and you're not always, I guess, going to be at the forefront of it, but knowing how you navigate it and what you can tolerate and what you can't, I think is really big, and understanding your audience as well. So the people who are around you, how do you communicate with them to really get them to understand your perspective? It's not your job to do it, but certainly understanding how they tick can be a really effective way in how you communicate with them to get your message across.
That is amazing. Thank you. The chat is just lighting up with love for this panel, and I can't help but reciprocate everything that's being said. You've all been so generous with your thoughts, with your experience, with your reflections on what today means, and I feel we've all learnt something, which is what we came here to do. So I thank you all. I'm going to close it off. Are there any last questions or last thoughts that anyone would like to share? I realize people have to get back. Oh, Mads, you go. Close this out.
Yeah, just one really quick thing, and I'd be amiss not to mention it because I should have said it before when we were talking about the future of International Women's Day. It goes without saying that in 10 years' time, I would like more trans women to be part of this conversation as well. That's all. I mean, we all know that already. I just feel like
Yes,
I should have mentioned that before.
yeah, I think that's an important, yeah. I've really been reflecting on that as well a lot, Mads. We're all here talking as women, but there's an important part of the women community and the trans women and the non-binary community that would have some very conflicting and confused feelings about today. So yeah, we will definitely endeavour to share those voices in the future. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a nice rest of International Women's Day, a reflective, perhaps inspiring, perhaps you can take something away from this conversation that can lead you to a little bit more activism rather than performative activism, as Mad said before. Go throw a cupcake in the bin and storm out of your workplace or something. Don't do that. Thank you, everyone. We've had a wonderful chat and I've really appreciated your time, and I look forward to catching up with you all at another time. Thank you.
Thank you.